We are going to get started. Welcome to Stop, Look, and Think, the Visual Thinking Strategies method. My name is Larissa. I am the program manager at the Jewish Women's Archive. I'm relatively new. Today is my first online learning program, and I'm very, very excited to be here and excited to have all of you here. Before we get started and I introduce our guest teacher, I just want to go through a couple tech items. If you didn't hear this before, if you came in early. So everyone can go ahead and adjust your volume if it's too quiet or too loud. Also, you have all been granted microphone access, so you'll be able to speak while you're not speaking. So I guess right now, if during times like that, if you can please mute your microphone so that we can't hear you, that would be great. That way, if you're typing or eating a crunchy snack, we will not hear that. You can also feel free to enable your webcam if you want to be seen. If not, that's okay. Today is a highly participatory program. You can feel free to simply participate by typing in the chat box. But if you would like to speak and be on screen, please feel free to do that. And anytime you do want to speak, please use the little hand raising icon on the top bar so that I will know that you would like to speak. So really quickly, for anyone who isn't familiar with the Jewish Women's Archive, we are a national nonprofit that is dedicated to making known the stories, struggles, and achievements of Jewish women in North America and beyond. And if you visit our website, you'll find the world's largest repository of material about and voices of Jewish women. As it says here, our mission is to document Jewish women's stories, elevate their voices, and inspire them to be agents of change. So it's not all about just collecting the stories, but about promoting them and demonstrating their value to the general public. I want to take a moment to say that you as educators are our partners in sharing Jewish women's stories. You are the ones who are on the ground sharing this rich and inclusive history with your students. So in other words, we could not do what we do without you. We couldn't fulfill our educational mission and goals without your work. So thank you for being our partners. So without further ado, I am very, very excited to introduce our guest teacher today. Tamar Rosenfeld-Cohen is not only an excellent teacher herself and someone who knows a lot about VTS and uses it in her classroom all the time. She is also my friend and colleague from graduate school, so I'm especially excited to have her with us today. So Tamar, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Larissa. Sorry. This is very exciting for me too. We get to share kind of our museum ed background with a lot of different contexts, which I think is going to be really interesting. So I'm Tamar, as Larissa said. I am an AP art history teacher in a high school, and I'm also head of the art department in the junior high and high school. So I do a lot of work with images, and I use VTS a lot. And what we're going to do today is learn a little bit about VTS. What are these words, these letters, and then we're going to really start right into modeling and just practicing using the method in different ways with different kinds of primary sources. And all of the primary sources we're using today are from JWA's amazing archives and online lessons. So they're all to you. There's a lot of really good stuff there, and we recommend kind of looking around and finding what's good for you. Sorry. So what is VTS? VTS stands for Visual Thinking Strategies, which is a method that was developed in the 90s. by Philip Yanowine, who was the director of education at the MoMA for many years, and Abigail Hausen, who is both an educator and a psychologist. She wrote The Theory of Aesthetic Development. The method is usually used when you're facilitating a discovery or some kind of analysis of an artwork. So it was used originally in museums and then traveled on to be used in other contexts like schools. And it's been shown through a lot of research over the years to help develop both critical thinking and communication skills. So just by practicing this method with an artwork, students are learning to think differently, are learning to break down what they see, are learning how to communicate what they're seeing and why. And eventually they're also learning to back up their arguments, which is pretty important when you're a learning student. So as I said, it's usually a facilitated discussion of an artwork. When we say a facilitated discussion, that already gives us a hint of kind of the VTS approach. So we don't have a teacher or an instructor or an educator, but we have a facilitator, and we'll discuss that role in a moment. And it's usually used with a group of students or learners. And what we're trying to do is encourage learners to look closely instead of kind of glancing, which is what we usually do. So take a minute and really stop and look. And then to talk about what students are seeing. What am I observing? What am I noticing? And as I start claiming things or stating arguments, I'm going to have to try and back that up with visual evidence. And later, when I hear my peers discussing this, I might end up thinking differently. I might get confused. There might be a question that I need to kind of settle as a group. And that really gives students a chance to practice hearing other opinions and dealing with other information that's coming up. So I said that we use it usually with an artwork. I don't always use it with an artwork. We use it with primary sources that we're going to see aren't always art. But it's really important for us to just get an idea of how this works. So we have 3 questions in VTS, and only 3 questions. What we're going to be asking as facilitators is what's going on in this picture, which in layman's terms would be, what do you see? You just start describing, observing and describing what you see. And the second question is, what do you see that makes you say that? So that's after our argument has been built, we're going to start and try and provide supportive evidence. So if I claim that I see X, I have to explain why I claim that. And then our third question, what more can we find, is usually kind of a follow-up, dig deeper, see what else you're noticing question. So why do we only ask these 3 questions? VTS is really focused on developing thinking skills and critical analysis. It's not at all about relaying information or learning facts. It's built to encourage students to think in a different way and develop those thinking and communication skills. So it's okay if I don't know the right answer as long as I'm thinking about it and supporting evidence from my visual world, from what I see in front of me. And that's why as facilitators, and that's why it's called a facilitator, we really don't do any correcting. We don't kind of provide facts. I'm not going to say anything about the painter or why there's an apple there or anything like that. What we'll do in this discussion will be to paraphrase comments, so kind of repeat things, kind of let students know what their peer has said if they're not following or if it was said quietly or if they're not sure they understood. We do a lot of pointing, so this is what Johnny is talking about right over here, to make sure that all the students are on cue and we're all noticing the same thing. And we also kind of link students' comments. So if one person said one thing that can be connected to what another student said earlier on, it's a way to kind of build more of a wider network of information and a better idea of what we're seeing in front of us. So this works really well with artworks, with other visual aids, and it really works for what it was made for, to build these skills. It's used in a lot of museums. There are a lot of museum-school partnerships, and it's really been shown to help students develop. But it doesn't work for me all the time because I teach specific information. I teach in a school context. So at the end of the day, my kids have to take a test and they do need to know what that apple stands for. So when I'm using VTS, I'm using something that's a little bit different because I do need to relay facts. I need to make sure my students have the right answer. And so I'll use kind of a VTS-based approach. But before we get to that, and that's why I wanted to kind of say, don't worry, we'll get to what you actually can do with this. I want us to try and practice VTS. So here's an image that we found from JWA's website. It's a photograph, as you can see. And what we're going to do is start with some VTS, and you'll be the learners. So I'm going to ask those three questions. What do you see? What do you see that makes you say that? And what else do you see? And we'd really like you to take a minute and look deeply at this image slowly. Take your time and then type into us or raise your hand and speak and tell us what your answers are, what you're seeing. And we're going to kind of do this briefly because later we're going to do a little bit more digging into this image, but just to get an idea of what it feels like.
We have several answers coming in. Thank you.
So someone saying, I see many women sewing. Fantastic. So we've identified the people in this image as women. We see that there are a lot of them, and we see that they seem to be sewing. Someone else noticed that there are a few men in there as well, which is surprising. Maybe we don't expect to see that. We see that they all look very similarly. They have similar hairdos. No one's smiling. So even though they're looking at the camera, as been said here, there doesn't seem to be a lot of mirth. They're great answers, everyone. There are some empty chairs, right? There's a lot of stuff on the table. It seems very, very busy. Great noticing of the floor. Something looks old-fashioned. There's a lot of trash or shreds of cloth on the floor. We have baskets at workstation, so maybe those shreds of cloth should have gone in the baskets. We don't know. So based on these arguments, what do you think you're looking at? What do you think this is? Yep, big room, lots of people crowded in. Looks like a factory, kind of like uniform stations. A sweatshop. Okay, great. It's a factory sewing, it's a sweatshop. That's what a lot of people are thinking of. And what you've done in the beginning is provided all the evidence. So you did question number 2 first. All the evidence to say that this is probably a sweatshop or a factory. So that's fantastic. And I didn't give you any information. I didn't tell you what year this is from. I didn't tell you what to look at. This is all your understanding of a very specific image. So yeah, I picked an easy one, but oh, someone even gave us a year, 1910. Fantastic. You're on the money. Without even having to say, oh, well, this is what a sweatshop looks like in 1910, you're figuring it all out yourself, which is fantastic because that's what we want our students to do. We don't want to stand there and lecture. Um, so like I was saying, this is a really effective practice, as you've seen, and it goes really quickly. Kids are into it. They want to talk. They want to share what they're seeing. And if we take a look at a more developed kind of version of VTS, this is what I often use. So I'll start my lessons with an open-ended VTS kind of approach. I'll ask those 3 questions. I'll put an image up on the screen and I'll say to my students, well, what do you see? I'm not going to start. You start. Take a minute to look at it, to really observe, pay attention to the details. So I'll start with VTS, but for me it is important. I mean, one of my learning goals for my students is for them to have certain understandings of context, historical or social. I need them to understand certain symbols that are used in this image. And so I do kind of have to help them along if they're not necessarily hitting everything on the money on their own. Like if not everybody's identifying this as a 1910 sweatshop, I've got a problem. So I'll start with Open VTS, and then I'll use 2 additional methods kind of mixed in. I'll use some scaffolding and layering. When I use scaffolding, it's really kind of a code for just guiding questions. If I want my students to pay attention to certain details, I'm not going to just say, please note the apple that represents Adam and Eve. I'll say, oh, there seems to be something on the table. What do you think that could be? What could be the reason for it being there? Or do you notice any symbols or any items that could be symbolic? So I'm kind of directing them at what I want them to look at, but I'm not giving them the answer in advance. I can also do some scaffolding with directionals. So kind of saying, let's look at the background. What do you think is going on in the background? Or have you noticed that there's something interesting going on at the bottom corner here? Or what do you think about this person's clothing? So those are all guiding questions. I'm not saying the information just straight out. And with layering, is when I'm going to slowly layer in some facts or information that's important for me to relay to my students while they kind of reach those points. So if we saw our sweatshop image and someone says, oh, well, like you did actually, they all have similar haircuts, I could start asking, well, were there many different styles at a certain period, or was it a more uniform style for certain women's wear, for example? Or the fact that you mentioned that there's mostly women there. I could say, sweatshop workers were often women of a certain age, and especially in sewing, that's kind of what we see across the board. And I'm giving historical information or context to what they're saying, but I'm not just throwing it at them in advance. It's through their own discovery. So it's not classic VTS. It's really important to understand the difference. VTS is just those three questions. We don't ever provide any additional information. But this kind of VTS-based approach can be really helpful when you're trying to get to additional learning types. So factual or specific ideas or themes. If I'm doing a class on gender and I show them this photograph that we just saw and no one mentions the fact that they're mostly women, I'm kind of not going to meet my goals. So it's important for me to guide my students to that direction. So now what we're going to do is we're going to try to look at that same image, this time with a bit more information. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, it is a garment factory and it is 1910, so good job. And we're going to try and practice some modeling of VTS-ish, so a VTS-based approach. And what I'd like for you to do is, instead of being the learners, try to think as the facilitators now. Try and give us some questions you would ask that might have scaffolding or layering in them that would direct your students to a certain concept or idea or image that's important for you to emphasize, but isn't giving away everything in advance, isn't lecturing them. So take a minute and think about how you would facilitate this kind of discussion. What do you think about the size of the room? Fantastic. That's immediately going to make them think about it. Is it big? Is it small? Does it feel like people are crowded in there? Is it a comfortable place to be? What could they be making? That's great. That'll get them really thinking about what this place is supposed to do, what comes out of there at the end of the day. Fantastic. What tools do you see and what do you think they're used for? That's great. If you want to also kind of bury the lead a little bit more, you could say what's on the table, right? You could kind of even take it one step back. With some of these images, students might not know what half this stuff is. So it's good to give them the opportunity to try and then work with what they've got. Oh, this is fabulous questions. Do you think they socialize while they work? What's the turn side? What do you think they're feeling? What is the kind of atmosphere in that room? Consider the fact that these students, they've never seen the image, so they don't know that it's necessarily a garment factory or what year it is. So maybe I could even ask, who are these people? Oh, here we go. How do the workers look, happy or sad? What do the workers seem to be feeling at the time? Or lovely, what role does you think the men play? I like that one because I also noticed that a lot of the men are standing along the perimeters of this room, which is a little iffy, but also really points to their role. So that's a great way to point that out to students. Do you think it's garments for women or men? What do you think of the clothes they're wearing, right? Are they at work? Are they at play? Does that look comfortable for them to work in? How old do the workers look? That's really great because they might start associating that with, oh, they're very old, they're very young, they seem like working age, but we don't see any of those horrible images of little kids here at the sweatshop, which is good because it kind of focuses this in on the more social issues here and not necessarily horrible labor law. Okay, so I think we're doing pretty good on kind of seeing what direction we could go. Let's see what else people are writing. What do you notice about the architecture of the room? Would you like to work here? That's great because that really forces kids to put themselves in the shoes of these people and helps them kind of associate with it a lot better, not so distant from them because they can imagine themselves in the space. Why are some of the men standing around? Right? Who does the work and who doesn't do the work? Who's the foreman? Where are they coming from? Are they migrants? So that's a really good question, but I don't know if we can answer that based on the photo. So let's try and use questions that still give us information that the students can kind of analyze through the image, and then you as the educator would be able to layer that in. You'd be able to say, well, who do you think these people are? And then I would maybe add in, please keep in mind, or you should know that at the time, most garment factory workers or most sweatshops were, you know, people who worked there were immigrants, poor immigrants. Are the work clothes fancy? Wonderful. Do you think this looks like a safe place? That's a really tough one because it actually looks nicer than most garment factories or sweatshops that I'd imagine. So it's kind of nice that we have an image that's more complex and maybe not so banal or obvious. Okay, so I think we're doing really well, and we seem to be enjoying this rich image, which we both really loved, and that's why we picked it. Just gonna see what else people are saying. Morning or evening? Fantastic. When is this occurring? And actually, where's the light coming from? I mean, we said it's a pretty big room. We see that there are big windows there. So this could actually be a kind of a nice setting. It doesn't have to necessarily be this horrible, dark, dank, place. Okay, so now that we've kind of seen the way that you can use VTS strictly and kind of in a more directed way in a VTS-based approach, I'd like us to also kind of consider how we actually are going to be using VTS ourselves. So, I mean, hopefully you guys are all going to leave and be super excited about VTS and use it in your every single lesson, but it's sometimes hard and overwhelming to figure out how you're going to use it in which context. And I think the most important issue here, which is true with many learning methods, is figuring out what your learning goals are. What do you want your students to end up with? Are they going to leave with a feeling? Are they going to leave with some kind of understanding? Are they going to leave with a skill? Is there a certain fact or an issue you'd like them to know a lot about? Are they going to experience a conversation about a complex issue with their peers? Get other ideas? So once you determine your learning goal, then you can figure out which image you're gonna choose, because that's the most important thing here. You have to choose the right image, and I think that's really true in what Larissa and I experienced putting this together, trying to figure out what image we should bring for these, educators who already know how to do everything and have seen everything. And I will admit I am not a civil rights or Jewish women expert. Um, so we kind of wanted to find something we could all relate to that would be interesting, have a lot of details in it. So it wouldn't just be that one of us notices one thing and then we're done. So a rich image, but also one that connects to kind of questions that are brought up a lot when you discuss life with students, right? So gender issues, class issues, the world as it's changed throughout history, issues that continue today, right, with slave labor. And we tried to find the right image for this specific program. So you might find an amazing picture that you love. You might find a painting. You might find a newspaper article that's really great. But if it isn't going to work for your lesson, save it for something else. Save it and show it to the students later and just explain to them about it. But it's got to be the right one or you're going to kind of miss the point. Because if it doesn't have relevancy, the students are going to get lost. And if it doesn't have enough meat to it, the students might get frustrated, especially if they're using a new learning method that they're not used to. Think about your learning experience. I don't know how often you get to sit in front of an image and are asked to just talk about it, what you see, without being told if it's a right or wrong answer. That can be really intimidating or really liberating for a lot of students. So take the time and select smart. Um, the second thing I really suggest doing is practicing VTS on the image yourself. Take a minute, try and see what you see in this image, try and imagine what one of your students might see in the image. Oh, Larissa, exactly what we thought was going to happen happened, and my screen froze up. in mid sentence, of course.
That's
And I'm
okay.
going to try and
You can
turn
just
this
keep.
off and turn it back on as I continue speaking. Sorry about that.
Adobe Connect is a great program, but not always perfect.
Not always. Okay, so we're going to try and figure this out and to just listen to my soothing voice. Um, so you want to try and practice VTSing the image yourself, both so you know what you're going to talk about and so you know what your students might come up with. And that could also mean asking other people, meaning I'm going to talk to, I don't know, my grandma or the kid next door who's 5 years old and likes to hang out in my front yard and see what they see, because your students could throw you a curveball. And kind of the point, or one of the wonderful things about VTS, is that you're gonna get a lot of different opinions. That's kind of one of the best things about this, is hearing what different people see that you never even thought would be there in that one same image. And once you've kind of practiced it, you're also prepared for their answers. And of course, this video is still not working, but we're going to power through, everyone. Um, and once I've done that, once I've practiced VTSing the image myself, what I'll usually do is kind of practice how I'm going to facilitate it. So I will actually write down some of my questions. I'll write down some of the answers I expect to get and how I might respond to them. I'll also write down things that I want to make sure come up. So that's kind of related to our scaffolding. If they don't mention this, how am I going to ask it? That can be really important when everything doesn't work out the way we planned. Case in point with the video, actually. So it really helps to just prepare for the best and for the worst. And lastly, once you've done all of this, I really recommend taking a beat and making sure that this all still makes sense with your general lesson. So are your goals still being met? Does this still mesh with the rest of your lesson? After these students experience this entire production, this entire discussion, are they going to be where you want them to be? Are they going to feel like they've had a really unique learning experience? Are they going to feel like they've had a successful experience? Right? We don't want to frustrate students. And is it going to further their learning? And you might find that you got to go back and change some questions or even change the image. So that's pretty much the plan on how to prepare for some VTS. And what I think we're going to do now is we're going to take an image, a new image. I'm not going to show it to you just yet. And we're going to do, again, another round of your facilitation. So we want you to kind of look at this image and see what you see here and what you'd be asking. What kind of questions would you use for facilitation? What kind of information would you layer in? And try and use that same process of what do you see? What do you see that makes you say that? So argument, and then supportive evidence for your argument, and then move on to what more do you see. So here's our image. And take a minute, and then we can figure out what you all would use it for, or in what context. What questions would you be asking? If anyone wants any background information on this, let us know. We're happy to explain. You might not all be familiar with what you're seeing here. Okay, so what would you ask? You want people to notice that there's only one black man there. Think for a minute as the facilitator. This looks like an old picture. That's great. Bring them into the era. What do you notice about the signs? Fantastic. So that could relate to, what's written on them, the text. It could relate to the fact that there are different languages here. What do the signs say? Awesome. So that's already getting into the content, the message, what these people are representing, what they're marching for. What do you notice about the gender? That's really good. I would maybe even take a beat back before that, and I would kind of ask, what kind of people do we see in this image? And then we could also discuss not just gender, but also age, maybe class even. Who seems to be part of this group? That's a really good one, because that's already kind of giving me a hint that there seem to be groups here, that they're marching together. Old or young? Hmm. What would we ask about maybe the context of where they are? What do you see in the background? Oh, great. Are they in a city or on the country or in the countryside? Right, it's hard for us to know. No buildings. There's grass. That would be great. Great supportive argument. When do you think this might be happening is great. And you can choose if you're going to show the year or not, if you're going to show them the information at the bottom of the photograph like we've done. What's the weather like? So that'll kind of give me an idea of when it's happening. Well, I love that question. Have you seen other images like this for what? That's great because that really gets students thinking visually, using their visual memory. What else do I know? What can I kind of recall and use to understand this? What's the mood? That's great because it is kind of, they do seem like they're kind of having a good time, even though some of them are pretty serious. Why are they carrying? Fantastic. It's a really good point. It depends on our students' level. We can't assume that they know what a protest is or what a march is. That's great. Do they look like they know each other? I love that question because I think it really gets students kind of thinking, gets just people thinking, oh, or did they come together? Did they like meet and then make the signs? What's happening there? It's really going to build up our narrative for the students. What might they be marching for? That's great. What are the people on the right doing? Really good question. And we also see people going in different directions or running off camera kind of thing. So are they connected? Are they not? Are they in a hurry? Yeah, some of them seem to kind of be meandering while others are just moving ahead pretty fast. The colors of the clothes? I'm not sure. I'm not sure where we're going with that question. That might confuse me a little if I'm a student. Um, but if it's symbolic where you're pointing at, or the fact that people are dressed formally, that would be a really good question. What do you see in the clothing, or do you notice anything special about their clothes? That's great. Gender breakdown, that's also good. Um, Also, you're already, you're really scaffolding ahead. You're kind of making sure that they notice those issues that are important for you to bring up. That's great. Jewish context, is everyone in Temple Youth, right? Is everyone a member of NIFTY? I mean, I doubt that the African American middle-aged gentleman in the center is a NIFTY guy, but that is exactly what's going to get students kind of thinking. Right, they all kind of are they're dressed. Sarah's mentioning that they all are kind of dressed similarly, so that might also give me a hint to the era. You see how nobody's really wearing a t-shirt, everybody's wearing something buttoned down, because this isn't counterculture 70s wild children. This is kind of something a little bit more respectable, maybe. That's a fantastic question. What Jewish values do you think about when you see this? So that's already kind of getting into our interpretation, which is fantastic. And that would probably come later in the kind of analysis and discussion of this image. Um, so that's great. And you guys have never seen this photo before. So imagine what you could do with an image that you've really taken the time or that you're an expert in to kind of explore. There's a lot of potential in this. And though I am big on images, on art, of course, you don't have to only use images. So that can come in two different ways. Way number one is you can use VTS as a writing and less as of discussion of an image or a source. So you can use it as a writing prompt, and that will give you a chance to develop students' writing. It also can save a little bit of time if you're not doing it in discussion format, or if you have students who are more shy and they're not there yet. You can really develop descriptive and argument building skills, And we've seen and heard this done by a really great third grade teacher a few years ago, and he just read out these amazing essays written by little kids. They were in third grade, and it's all just totally based on that VTS prompt kind of structure. So, what do I see? So, an observation. What do I see that makes me say that? So, that would be the supportive argument. And then, what else do I see? Which is kind of giving them a chance to continue looking deeply. So, you can use it as writing prompts, it doesn't just have to be discussion. And in addition, we also kind of have been thinking about ways to use VTS on non-image sources. So you could analyze other things. It could be a newspaper article. It could be a letter. It could be a poster or an advertisement that was once in excuse me, that was once in the newspaper a while back, right? Let's think about the difference between the advertisements for soap that we see now versus the advertisements for soap that we used to see in the 50s. Um, and what you're going to do is use the exact same questions as your prompts. You're going to ask, what do I see? If it's something visual, keep in mind that you could also use something that's completely different, like a recording or a video. And then you might say, what do I hear? Or if you're reading something, what am I reading? What do I notice? And then your support, what do I see that makes me say that? And what else do I see? And it's really important to use that sandwich because it brings kids back to the kind of deep observation, which is what we're really going for here. That's why we use the word stop in the title of this webinar. So here's a chance for us to do that. This is kind of a little bit more challenging, it's like a level up. And what we've got on the right is a letter, also a primary source from the 60s taken from JWA's website. So we have the actual image of the text. And on the left, Larissa has kindly typed up the text so we can read it easily. And what I'd like you to do is take a minute to read what you see on the left. I mean, unless you want to really try and read what you see on the right, which might be hard. And then take a minute to look, to really appreciate the visual aspect of this primary source on the right. And once we've read it, I'm going to ask you what you're noticing. I'm going to kind of ask you, what do you see? And what can you learn about this? What can you say about this letter? And then what do you see or read that makes you say that? So here we're going to talk both about content, which is on the left, and about shape, which is on the right, so what it looks like. So everyone just take a minute. I'll stop talking, and you can read the text, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts. So what are you reading? What do you see here? Intimacy and caring. Fantastic. We have a really great use of words. A letter. So great, it's a letter. We didn't assume it was before. A concerned father to a daughter, so I know who it's between. We're feeling a lot of intimacy and caring. So we've got a tone, hand signed and affectionate with daddy. Exactly. That's one of the things that we really noticed, which is why we loved this primary source, because there's that beautiful handwritten signature on the really formal letterhead. An unusual situation. We know that the daughter's in some kind of revolutionary movement, right? We don't know if it's women's liberation. We don't know if it's civil rights. He doesn't usually tell her she's wrong. Exactly. We kind of feel that there's some kind of maybe kind of really difficult conflict here for this father, but he's also really worried. You have physical and legal dangers. He likes the values, he supports her, but he's worried about the cost. He's definitely communicating support. He's saying, we hope you succeed and keep well and good luck, and we don't say what you're doing is wrong, but we are very worried. hmm The child might have felt unsupported, and he's setting the record straight with this letter. I love that kind of narrative that you just told. That's, I mean, very possible that that's kind of how things worked out, and he wants to make sure she knows how they actually feel. Yeah, we're definitely getting some historical information. We've got a larger community. We've got some kind of group of lawyers that they're using to give them some support in this kind of weird situation. We also can see where this person lives. So he's not exactly in Alabama, right? Which kind of gives us an idea of the historical and social context he's in. So his daughter is able to go out and, we don't know, protest, eventually maybe get jailed. Yep, he's definitely, you're right. He's kind of giving us context of what's going on in Europe. So imagine using this in a history lesson and getting kids to think about what he might be relating to. It's a really, really rich letter, and it's just a letter from a father to a daughter, but there's so much in here. Sarah, you exactly hit what we really loved about this. So there's this super formal typed up letter with the date and it's his letterhead, and then there are all these little corrections and the word daddy's in there written by hand, and there's something really, really evocative about that and even emotional. Like you can see these words that he's typed up and retyped over or corrected. Um, and it kind of gives you a much more personal feeling, but also exactly that conflict between the norms and the social expectations versus his feelings and what he's trying to communicate. Yeah, he really cares about getting it right. Yeah, maybe he feels like he's already been misunderstood so many times. This is his chance to talk and not be interrupted finally. Exactly. He's really taken the time with this letter. It's important. Absolutely. That signature, the way, and the fact that he writes to his daughter Chicky, right? Not Miss Vivian, um, which is really personal. That gender is absolutely what we also noticed. That concept of young girls and safety. So there's not just issues here that are larger kind of social context. There's also him maybe as this kind of maybe a clash, kind of a culture clash between his young daughter, this young teenage daughter that is totally out of control but is fighting for what she believes is right, and maybe his more traditional upbringing and his ideas of gender. Yeah, we can absolutely see him kind of agonizing over this letter, right? Taking the time, making sure she understands what he means, but also being able to express himself maybe in a more intimate and quiet way, not in an argument, maybe. So all of this gives us amazing and really rich content to discuss with our students, but it also gives us a chance to think about what things look like. So through this letter, if we had just given you the text typed up the way you would get it maybe in a history book, you're getting a lot, but you're not getting the same experience of analyzing the visual as well. So for example, if it said all my love daddy, that'd be lovely. And as you say here, it makes him seem like he's treating her like she's his little girl, and he's making sure the connection is very loving and intimate and familiar. It's not something very formal, but there's something to that handwritten signature, and it's the only handwritten thing in the letter. It was important for him to do it by hand. That emphasizes that point even more. And maybe without even noticing what the text includes, we're noticing how different it is visually, and that draws our eye to the text itself, to the word daddy. So think about how the content can really be emphasized and enriched by the visual aspect. And you can use this, I mean, think about newspaper clippings like sizes of headlines. Think about posters, the kind of images they're going to use and the kind of font that they might use or the color that they might use for certain words. And I mean, people are still analyzing it. This is great. There's so much in here. You could really use it for a whole lesson. People sometimes get freaked out and say, I can't just bring one thing. I have to have my 17 different primary sources and then a worksheet and then 3 prompts. Give yourself a chance and give your students a chance to just kind of jump in and swim around, just dig deeply into an image or a primary source. It can be really, really interesting for them to just take the time. We don't slow down enough when we're learning. We're always kind of racing to the next test or the next kind of goal. So after we've kind of seen all of these different options, we reach our conclusions here. We discussed how VTS, visual thinking strategies, is a learning method that it's based on artwork or images, but it can be used for other primary sources as well. Um, it has been developed for art and a lot of visual context, so it is good to use kind of those visual stimuli. And it really does develop critical thinking and observation skills. So you're going to see your kids, as long as you continue using VTS, you're really going to see them advance. You're going to see them progress and suddenly be able to back up their arguments with much stronger evidence, and even be able to kind of think differently about images that they might have thought about in a more shallow manner before then. And I mean, we've shown that you can use it in a lot of different ways. VTS, in theory, is very inflexible, but we can kind of hijack it and use it the way that it works for us. And when it comes to learning from primary sources, it really fits beautifully. So we really encourage you to try that. Um, However, please make sure that you do it in a way that works for you. It should work for your lesson. It should work for your students. It should work for you. I mean, it should be an image or a source that you're comfortable with, and that you're interested in. Because our goals are really to spark students into being interested and curious about what's around them, to really get them to start thinking. Um, so I think that's kind of the end of our official presentation here. And we'd love to hear if there are any questions that we can answer.
Like we have one question coming in.
Perfect timing.
Oh, great. Welcome back, Tamar.
Thank you.
Good to
Still
see
here.
you.
At the end, how effective, right?
Nick of time.
How long would you spend on one object? That's a good question. It really depends on the object. I know some teachers who will teach an hour and a half on one image. I think it depends on your students and on your goals. So if you don't have that much time, I don't think it's necessary to spend an entire hour on one image. And I feel like students can get bored because they're just not used to it. So maybe once they're used to using VTS and looking deeply, half an hour is plenty of time. Consider also how many students you have. So how long will a discussion take for everyone to kind of get a chance to say something? I'd usually say at least a good 20 minutes, definitely in the beginning. Let's see. Larissa, this is available for download and stuff, right?
Yes. I was just typing the answer, but yeah.
Good question
Go
about,
ahead.
okay, Larissa's gonna give us all the important information. Homework. I do use homework. What I've been doing lately is I'll either use my same VTS prompts and give them an image they haven't seen before, but might be similar, so they're not totally kind of foreign, and that's where I use writing. I have been kind of doing something new. I don't know how it's going to turn out yet, but I will share what I'm doing with you. Is I ask them to discuss with another person to explore together as a group with someone else. It could be, their best friend next door. It could be grandma. It could be their aunt. It could be their parents, a sibling. A new image, and use the VTS prompts and have them kind of be the facilitators, which gives them a chance to think about that, as well as kind of see what someone close to them feels or what someone close to them thinks. And then you also get the back and forth, the kind of intergenerational. You get parents seeing what their kids are doing in school or in class. So I do recommend it. I would keep it simple at first. So, just write a few sentences about how it felt to discuss this or use these prompts. And later you can kind of develop that a bit more. my pleasure. Thank you.
If anyone has any more questions, you can feel free to type them in. You can also feel free to contact me after. I can also put you in touch with Tamar, as long as that's okay with her.
I think that's okay.
Thanks, Tamar. So wonderful to be getting all this feedback right off the bat.
I know, this is great. We haven't even paid people yet, so
It's on the way.
yeah.
So I am going to step in just for the last few minutes. There are just a few things I'd love to go over before we leave. First of all, I also want to join everyone in thanking Tamar for a wonderful presentation. It was incredible, and you really showed us how we can practically apply VTS in the classroom. Which is really, really great. And thank you to everyone, to all of our participants for such wonderful, rich discussion. You also helped really make this a great webinar today. So thank you so much for your efforts. So just a few things, as Tamar mentioned before, all the primary sources that you saw today are from JWA, and they are from our Living the Legacy curriculum, which is our curriculum that has lessons about the civil rights movement and also labor. And you'll also see links here to the specific primary sources that we used today. If anyone wants to go ahead and click on any of these links, they will open in a separate window. You won't be kicked out of the room, so feel free if there's anything you want to save right now. I will also, after the webinar, I will be putting up a web page on our site that is dedicated to this webinar, so you will find the recording, the slides, all of the primary sources, and also some other resources about VTS. So all of those will be available to you, and also as Freddie asked about getting the chat log, and I will go ahead and download that and send it to all of you after. So I'm also very excited to announce and introduce this year's Natalia Twersky Educator Award. Many of you probably already know about this, maybe have applied before, maybe have won before. But for anybody who doesn't know about the award, I just wanted to say a little bit about it. So we give this award annually to a winner and a finalist who use primary sources in creative ways to integrate Jewish women's stories into their teaching. And I have to say, if you go ahead and write a lesson using VTS, you might have a little leg up on the competition, just saying. And the application for 2016 is now open. So you can go on our website and you can start applying. I did want to highlight a couple changes we have made to the award from last year. So for people who are familiar, just so you know. So first, to be eligible, you just have to be any educator working with students in grades 5 through 12. You no longer have to be an educator in a Jewish setting. You can be in a different religious setting, you can be in a secular setting, as long as you are bringing Jewish women's stories into your classroom, or if you want to experiment with that, you are eligible to apply for the Twersky Award. We have 2 cash prizes. The winner receives $2,000, the finalist receives $500, and for the winner, we also offer to come into your community, only if you want, we won't invade, but we will come and we will present the award to you in person, no matter where you are, and we will also do a free workshop for your community. You'll also see that there are 2 deadlines. We've broken the application down into 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2. So phase 1 is basically a proposal. We're asking just for some basic information about you and about your lesson. And then in phase 2, which you'll see is due on June 15th, that is when you will submit your physical lesson plan and your student work. We need committee members, Twersky committee members. So if you're not interested in applying for the award yourself, but would be interested on serving on the committee that will select the next winners, please let us know. We could use your help. So please go ahead and email me at lklebe@jwa.org. You can also find my email on our website if you don't have it already, but I think most of you have it. And if you want to learn more about the award, more information about the application process, about the history of the award, how to nominate a fellow educator, just visit jwa.org/Twersky to learn more today. And last but certainly not least, thank you all for your participation in today's online learning program. I think for me personally, this was a great kickoff to my time at JWA, a great first webinar to have. And we would appreciate it so much if you would take a moment to complete a brief survey about your experience today. I would love it if you could actually all go ahead and click on this link so that it will be open open on your computer once I end this meeting. So that way you can just go ahead and fill out the survey while it's fresh in your mind. We want to provide you with the highest quality programming and the programming that is going to be most useful to you. And you are our partners in that, obviously. So your feedback is extremely useful to us, and we will listen to what you have to say so that we can best meet your needs. And also, again, because I am new, it's very good for me to get your feedback so I know what you thought about today's webinar. So with that, I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank Tamar again. And we are gonna end about 2 minutes early, which is always great. So thank you again to everybody, and have a wonderful afternoon.